Next we have is an intro video from Bella.
Shippensburg, it's Bella here, and I just want to take a moment and say hey, and that I miss all of you. I'm going to be in Dallas this weekend, and so I will not be with you. But I wanted to take a moment and introduce this new series that we're starting tonight, and that we'll be continuing throughout May, and also introduce our very first speakers for this series. This series that we're starting is called Impacted People. What this series is a bunch of people are going to be coming in and sharing with us their testimony, ways that God has impacted and worked in their lives, and ways that He wants to impact and work in your lives as well. And so tonight, our very first speakers for the Impacted People 2025 series is Dominic and Chas. And we are so excited that they are going to be sharing with us a little bit of their story and their testimony. So please welcome them, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Woo!
Do you know how long it took us to get these things down? I don't know how you guys do this on Sunday. Yes, but you do it like by yourself, and it took like Carrie and I. Like... That's true. All right, so I'm going to warn you. Disclaimer: if you are somebody that cries easily, I am going to do my best not to cry, but those that know me know. And usually the tears aren't because I'm sad. It is just because God has been so good in our life. The things that we have experienced and His goodness. So if you are a crier, you should go get your tissues now. If you cry at somebody else crying, just go get them. But we are excited to be able to kick off this series. I'm excited that I get to share the stage with Dominic, because this is actually more his story. I'm going to just be sharing kind of the mom point of view as to what I got to see God do alongside him. For those of you that don't know our story or know Dominic, 8 years ago, we lost his dad after a very long battle with a lot of illness. He was waiting on a lung transplant, and then during that process was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and then was given only a 2% chance to make it through. And then after he was cured of his stomach cancer, went back on the transplant list, but never got his lungs. But through that, we got to see God's goodness, and some amazing miracles worked in his life that doctors told us we would never get to see. And through that, my faith grew, his faith grew. Ken was responsible for leading me to Christ. So when we lost him, it ruined the foundation of our faith. More so Dominic than me, just because I had been walking the path longer and I had seen what God could do. And I was able to hold on to those promises. Whereas he was 10 and he didn't really have that experience. So when the time came and he was kind of working through these things and there was a lot of anger and frustration, one of the first places I saw him turn his anger was towards God. And he wanted to leave the church, and he had all these questions and all these doubts, and it really took me by surprise when he wanted to leave the church, because we had been at that church for almost 8 years. And it was the one place that we could always go to as a family. Like, even when his dad got sick, it was the one thing that we could always do together as a family. So when he had said that he wanted to leave the church and try to find another church, it was something that was really hard for me to take, because it was that one last connection I had to Ken. And all of my friends were there, and my support network, and the people that walked us through some of the darkest times of our lives. But I also knew that with everything that was going on in his life, that it wasn't the place that we could stay. He needed something else. And that's kind of where his story starts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really hard to go back to that church because, yes.
Use it.
Yeah, it was really hard to go back to that church because, like, everyone would always ask questions about how I was feeling, and they would always go, "You was in a better place," and that just made me even more mad. So I remember going up to my mom one day, like, I wanted to find another church, and she told us no, we already had a church, that we weren't leaving, and I told her, I remember telling her that, no, she had a church, not me. Then about a year later, I met Cole Eckenrode at a basketball practice, and he was telling me that him and his family was going to help with a church opening up in Shippensburg, and they invited me to come, and I told my mom, and I was honestly shocked that she said yes, because she was very hard set on not leaving at church. Yeah, so when the time came to come to the Grand Point, we both liked it and decided to make it our home. But they didn't have a youth group at the time, but that was probably for the best, at least for me, because I wasn't in the right space or mind to come here, because I just wasn't ready to be around people again. And yeah, I'm not sure if I even would have came. But I liked coming on Sundays, and I really connected with Pastor Kevin. And God started to work on my heart a little bit at a time. I still had a lot of emotions, though.
Yeah, those emotions were not little emotions. They were some pretty big emotions. Those of you that know Don pretty well know that he tends to be pretty even in his emotions. He doesn't get loud unless he's wound up about basketball. He doesn't have his mom's Irish temper. He's very much his father's calm self. But at that point in his life, he was really angry, and he was lashing out a lot. Most of it was usually directed at me. There were constant fights, and he had actually gotten to a point in his life where he had just stopped talking to me. And the only times it seemed like that he talked to me is if we were fighting about something. And I'm not talking about the kind of fights you guys have with your parents when they ask you to clean up something and you're tired of hearing it for the third time. I'm talking about screaming, yelling, slamming doors for the simplest of things. He had gotten into a depression that was pretty scary. Pretty scary, where there were times that we worried about him hurting himself. And I would find myself just constantly pleading with God to take his pain, restore just the slightest glimmer of the happy kid that I used to know before he lost his dad. And then the time came that the Shippensburg campus opened their youth group. And it was through youth group that I started to see some changes. And God started to do some really awesome things. He started moving the right people and the right friends into his life so that God could start doing what he needed to do.
Yeah, coming into youth group, I didn't have many friends. I had one close friend that I could trust, but other than that, I didn't have any friends. I just lost where I was. All right. Coming to youth, my relationship with God didn't exist. I was angry still because I lost my dad. The things just didn't make sense to me. When I started coming here, it was just to get out of the house and give me some space. Maybe I wouldn't make some friendships, but I was really looking for the answers of why things happened the way they did. Tucker was the first youth leader I built a relationship with. His sense of humor matched mine, and he helped me feel comfortable. Youth group quickly became a place that was outside, but that was comfortable and safe, and allowed me to leave the chaos, the status of my life, outside for a little while. God used Tucker to help me figure out, God used Tucker to help me figure out my path and my spiritual walk. I could share with him my frustrations and struggles with faith. I could have asked questions and shared doubts without feeling judged. Still found myself having struggles. Youth group didn't fix my problems, but it definitely helped me realize that I had other people to help me through it.
We often tell you guys in here that this, thank you, I meant to grab the ones out of my bag. We tell you guys all the time that we're not created to do this life alone. And one of the things I am so very thankful for are the relationships that he started making at youth group, because I could see as he was in here with Scott and Tucker and Mark and Logan and John that he was letting go of some of this anger, and he was starting to find some joy again in his life, and he was making connections to some of the other youth that were here, and he was getting back to this little, kind of the Dominic that I remembered. Now, we were still having our issues, but he had a place that he could go, whereas he may not have been communicating with me. He had a place at youth group, surrounded by a group of men that could pray with him, who could talk about scripture, lead him back to the word to help him find the answers to the things that he was struggling with. Individuals that when I was struggling, I could go to and go, hey, this was a bad day. Like, this was rough. He won't talk to me. Maybe he'll talk to you. And the leaders were always great. They always kept his confidence. And they would say, hey, he was talking in small group, and he participated, and, he shared some things, and, please just know he's working through this, and he's okay. You don't have to worry about him. So that always, helped me know that God was doing what needed to be done. And even though it was hard for me as mom to realize that I wasn't the one being used, but that God had people to use to get him to where he needed to be. One night in particular, and it was a youth group night, and it was probably by God's grace that the fight happened on a youth group night, because I don't know that after that fight, I probably would have allowed him to live if he would have stayed home. But looking back on things, I think it's the evening that really was probably the major turning point for you. It was one of our biggest fights, and before I brought him to youth, I just kind of, God, I don't know what youth holds tonight, but if you will open his heart. Give him ears to hear whatever the message is tonight. Let him make a connection, because I can't do this. I'm failing. Only you can do this. And drove him up. And at that point, we were over in the church, is where we held youth group. And we always hear people talk about, like, oh, I heard God say, and I heard the Spirit speak. I had never had one of those experiences. But when we pulled up out front, JT opened the door, and that was his first night here. And this calm came over me, which was the strangest feeling, because I was still enraged when I pulled up here. Like, I was white knuckling. I couldn't push him out of the car fast enough. Like, I was so angry. But JT walked out, and for those who don't know, the Hopples and us go way back. That is a young Dominic and a young JT. I used to be the trainer at Chambersburg High School, and I took care of the Hopples, and Dom was the obnoxious child that would run around on the sidelines in the training room, and he thought he ran the school. But he and JT made a connection way back when. And they've kind of stuck with each other. And Don would even, when JT moved on and played football at Ship, he followed him over to Ship. I think there's one in there, yep, hanging out together. So they've always had this very special connection. And for some time, there was a period of time where they hadn't seen each other and hadn't spoken. And I think that evening was probably the first, like it had been in a while. So when he walked out, there was just this feeling where I was like, all right, I know, Lord. He's got this. And it just all seemed right.
Yeah, JT coming to youth group really helped me in growing my faith because I thought of him like family. He knew our family and what we had been through. He had always wanted the best for me, and I knew that he would want to help me be successful in building my relationship with God. He had been a regular presence in many parts of my life, always encouraging and supporting me. He would come to my basketball games, award nights, and we were in the same Bible study together. JT wasn't the only one. So many of the other leaders have shown up for me. They have been at sporting events or school functions to show their support. Standing in the gap where my dad would have been, God used the youth group to heal a lot of my brokenness. I had friendships that kept me from feeling alone. I found myself surrounded by leaders who guided me in my faith the way my dad would have. And I found my faith and built a relationship with God because of Greencastle Youth Group.
When anybody asks me about our youth group, I always point back to what it's done in Dominic's life. I've seen it work and do amazing things in each and every one of you, but just to see, especially in my own son, what it's done and how God has worked through our leaders for him has been unbelievable. And it's not just Tucker and wasn't just JT. It was the guys that were here in the beginning, Logan, John, Melody, Mark, I can't remember who else, but then even up to the ladies, Carrie, Aaron, Julie, Brian, leaders at Chambersburg, every leader that has come in contact with him has left an impression. They have all wanted to make a difference. They poured something into him that has changed him and has made him a better, not just a better person, but also, a better believer and a better person in Christ. And when I think about where we were when he started youth group to where he was when he left here as a senior, I think back to way when Shippensburg started. Pastor Kevin did a message around Zechariah 9:12, and that verse says, "Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope, and even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you." And I remember leaving church that Sunday so angry over this verse because Kevin was talking about how God's blessings are so abundant and he can return to us twice what we have lost. And too often we get caught up in the blessing or the dream that we had that we lost. And that we think about it through our vision and what we think it should look like instead of what God can do and what God can create. And we lose sight of what he can do for us. And I was looking at things through that earthly vision because I left going, really? How's God going to return his dad? ×2? Really? But about 2 years ago, I started to see the big picture, and I started to understand that verse. He was in church, and he was surrounded by some guys from youth group, and it all started making sense. And I think it's easier to explain, and we have a picture, it's easier to see. This is from a lunch we did right back around Father's Day last year. We decided to do a lunch to thank all of the men that kind of stepped up in his life after he lost his dad. Other than his godfather and the Hopples, the rest of those men came into his life after his father passed. And there are 3 other men that weren't able to be there. And I realize now that this is what that scripture means. Because God sent all the men he needed. And they filled in all the other places and stood in the gap. And it might not be his dad, but God knew what he needed every step of the way, and he answered that need. And it was all answered through an invitation to come check out my church from somebody very similar to all of you sitting here. So, before we wrap up, we always wrap up with a challenge. So Dominic, what is your challenge?
So my challenge, sorry, thank you about that, bro. So a challenge for you guys to build a relationship with your leaders because they want what's best for you, and they want to walk this journey with you.
And I'm gonna kind of add to that and encourage you to kind of be like Cole. Who do you know you can invite to church? Because had Cole not invited Dominic, we would probably not be here sharing our story. And I often wonder, how long would it have taken for God to do what he needed to do to get Dominic through what he needed to get through, had Cole not said, hey, come check out this new church that my dad's helping to build and get started here in Shippensburg. So think about that. So with that being said, that's his story, our story. We do not have questions for small group tonight. You will go to a small group and have some survey questions. However, Bella did want to provide some time for questions for you guys. If you guys had questions for Dominic or for myself, because, you know, Dominic is dying to answer your questions. I'm hoping somebody has something. Ronnie?
As you were kind of going through loss and grief, this is kind of a question for both you guys and the leaders, but is there anything that you guys can do, or that anybody can do, if you're going through loss to kind of help you go through that, and that, like, reminders that you can do that?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I think one of the things for us, and I know, like with him at his other church, at our other church, like we're called to be the hands and feet, right? So our instinct when people are hurting and people go through loss is we want to take care of people. We want to help. And I think, like, our church was really good at wanting to help and come in and support us and take care of us. But I think it's very easy to go from being the hands and feet to sometimes making people feel like a project. And I think that's where we kind of got at some point, where we kind of felt like a project that needed to be taken care of instead of loved on, if that makes sense. And I think Dominic touched on, I think sometimes we have to be careful with the platitudes, because I understood what people meant when they said he's in a better place, because yeah, he wasn't suffering anymore. But for a 10-year-old who needs his dad, really, no, he doesn't get that. But we want to help, so we try to say the things. My go-to phrase when I know somebody has lost somebody or somebody is hurting is I always say, I know that there is not a single thing I can do and say that is going to make this easier, but I would really like to help. How can I help? Or I just tuck a gift card and a card in the mail with a little prayer written inside. Because sometimes we just get tired of answering questions and seeing people, if you've ever been there. It gets exhausting answering the same questions over and over and over again. I think that's a good question. I don't know how you would answer that.
I was gonna say, like, I have friends that I can talk to now, but back then I didn't really have anyone to talk to. Kind of just stayed in my room.
I don't know if the leaders have anything that they would add to that.
I think kind of just being present for someone, right? Like Chaz said, sometimes people have like decision fatigue, or like it's a lot of energy to like reach out and to like feel like you might even be rejected even after someone's offered to help, right? And so just being like, hey, I can be at your house on this day, does that work for you? Or, hey, this is something that I can do for you, when's a good time for it? Instead of, oh, if you need help, let me know. Everyone's going to say, let me know, but that's a lot to be like, well, who said that, and when are they available, and who has kids, and like, so just showing up for people. And you don't always have to know what to say or what to do, but just being there.
How many of you know the Taylors? Marcy and Randy, Seth, Taylor? Yeah. They run the Drew Michael Taylor Foundation. I used to be in their Sunday school group while Ken was sick, and Randy, and I know I'm not going to do him justice in the phrase what he would used to say, but he used to have a saying like, one of the hardest places to be is in a room full of happy Christians when you're grieving. And that one has always stuck with me. I didn't get it before, but when Ken passed, I really got it. But Marcy, her card stuck with me the most after I lost Ken. Hers didn't come right away. Her sympathy card didn't come right away. She sent it a few weeks later. And I remember having a conversation with her at some point in time, and she was like, everybody comes right away. And then the support disappears. And people are left feeling like, oh, do they see me? Do they remember me? So her card came a few weeks later with a note that, hey, I have a frozen lasagna in my deep freeze with your name on. Let me know when you want it. So like she just went ahead and made the dinner, already had a space already stored, but didn't want to burden me with it. So I thought that was really nice because she like wanted me to know that she had thought about me, but she didn't want to inconvenience us. So.
And I think too, as Christians, we said about happy Christians. It's okay to be angry as a Christian. It's okay to be angry with God. It's okay to let them know that you are not okay. And as fellow Christians, it's okay for our friends that are Christians to not be okay. Like, it's important for us to not be okay together. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to be there in the hard times, not just the good times. And like what Dom said about, being in a better place, that's so not what you want to hear when you just had an immense loss. You need to know that you can be angry, you can yell at God, and I am here with you in that. I think is important.
The speaker that we had at the gathering on Thursday said something that really stuck with me, and it was Jesus met people where they were at to bring them to where he knew they needed to go, right? Like he joins you in your sadness and he joins you in your anger. So join your friends in that too.
I want to just add to what Joy said there. I lost my dad when I was pretty young, not near the same as Dawn. But I can remember standing in the line at the funeral and everybody coming up and saying, we know how you feel. Or the same thing they told Dawn. Told my cousins walked through. They lost their dad when they were my age. And that really did. Those two knew her right there. It's very hard to come up with something to say when you're I don't know if you remember when you were talking to someone like this last night, but being the person receiving all that, I understand exactly why Dawn was wanting to get out of it, because just in a day's time, I couldn't hardly handle it. Because, when there's what to say, it's what everyone says, I know how you feel, sorry for it a lot, but they don't unless they were always through. And it does make it tough. But whenever my cousins walked through, two brothers walked through, and they told me that, it floored me, because I was very young when they passed away, and they're a good bit older than I was. And it really sunk in when everybody said it.
And I think I would add to this that even though that we went through this this hard time, and I remember there being a time where I wished, like, I prayed that I could just take it all away from him, that he didn't ever have to go through it. A couple weeks ago, I saw a quote, and again, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines of, don't try to step between your child and their testimony. That hit me because everything he went through, as rough as it was, as ugly as it was, as unkind as he was at times, and you guys know him, he's not an unkind kid. It created a testimony and a young man with a heart after God and a heart that wants to help people and change things, that if we had to go back and go through those times again, I wouldn't change things, because God used every bit of it. So as you go through struggles, ask yourself, what is God creating in this for me? How is he using this in my life?
So you said about earlier how, like, you didn't have a hard time getting mad at God and kind of like you his promises and stuff like that. So what were some of those promises that you were referring to?
So when, I feel like that's a whole other day. So when Dominic really didn't ever know his dad healthy. His dad got sick pretty much shortly after he was born. We found out about his lung condition, and we were told that he was going to need this lung transplant. And he was told, oh, you won't live X amount of years without a transplant. I think he was given 4 or 5 years. He lived 11 years without a transplant, 10 years without a transplant. He was given a 2% chance of living with the stomach cancer. It's got a high death rate when you get diagnosed with stomach cancer. And his tumor, just so you know, they actually, when they found the tumor, they had to remove his entire stomach. The tumor was so large. And the doctors at Pittsburgh were surprised that it was only stage 1 cancer, because it was so large and that it hadn't spread anywhere. The doctors were like, I don't understand. And I remember his dad going, I understand. And I, at that point, was just kind of still in this, like, okay, Lord, I get it, but I'm really tired of all these tests. But he handled things with such grace during his illness. It's still a test that I am not very good at. I'm working on. But I saw him time and time again show up in situations. There were times when we were, when we moved to this area, we knew nobody. We knew nobody in this area, and he had just recently gotten diagnosed. Our first week at the church we had been at before here, we met a lady, my best friend, whose son had been through transplant. And here I was stressing out, like, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we raising all this money? We've got this, 1-year-old, I can't afford daycare. Who's going to watch him if we have to fly out to get you your lungs? And here was this lady who knew the ins and outs of transplant and walked us through the whole process. Like, God just put the right people and the right things in our path at every single turn. And over the years of Ken being sick, I saw him just show up. And when my faith got rocked, it wasn't as large. Mine was more of an anger because I think I was expecting another miracle. We had seen so many. And Ken would say, he got me through this because he has something else I need to do. And he would use everything he had been through to tell other people about his God and what his God could do. And we were very convinced that he was getting a lung transplant because God was going to use this story to tell people how amazing he was. And so when he got sick and ended up in the hospital with pneumonia right before he died, there was not a thought in my mind that he wasn't coming home. Like, I absolutely believed he was coming home because he had always come home. God was going to show up with that miracle. And it was a big part of what our fights were about. Because when I got that call that I needed to come up to the hospital, that they were concerned, he wanted to go. And I said, no, it's fine. He's coming home. God's got this. And that was part of the fight. So that's where my faith got rocked. But I learned later, I believe a lot of that was God showing me what my testimony was going to end up being through this. And Ken had done what he needed to do. God had done his job. God had used Ken. Ken had saved a lot of people, brought a lot of people to Christ through his story. It was time. But I was not ready for that.
Question. So now that you're out of your group, how do you keep your faith? Like, what do you do on, just kind of keep yourself, obviously you guys come to church every Sunday and you guys have youth group, you have that kind of coordination on a weekly basis. What do you do now that you're an adult?
Probably, well, I usually just go to church because I work all the time now, so I can't go to Bible studies anymore. And it's not going on anymore either. Just usually in my Bible, in my free time when I'm not at work, or like if I'm tired before I go to bed. Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, we will turn. Ulysses, he's over here squeaking chairs. Oh no, we have worship. Before I turn, making them all run away from Lily and Ronnie. All right, go ahead and prepare for worship. Thank you guys.